Hello, and welcome to my humble storage room. Please sit down because I have to tell you about something that is horrific. There was a time when the idea of a video game being adapted into a movie or TV show was an exciting prospect. But over time, a sense of apathy towards this practice settled in. And let's face it, they haven't been handled very well. So it's easy to see why I didn't have high hopes when a Castlevania TV series was announced. However, I was surprised by what season 1 had to offer, and I highly recommend it. When I finished, it left my mind racing of all the different possibilities that the next season could bring. Would the heroes struggle their way through the castle on their way to face down Dracula? Perhaps it would follow a broader story where they travel throughout the countryside, assisting those under attack while moving closer to Dracula's castle. Well, neither of those things happened, and that's fine, but what did transpire left me completely baffled. I had just watched something with barely fleshed out new characters, wasted potential with returning characters, redundant scenes, a wasted plot, four unique characters that never speak a line of dialogue, and a plan of betrayal that is a lot like that hitchhiker I picked up 3 years ago. So dumb and so easy to poke holes through. Maybe it is just me, but I find it harder to get invested in things. Burned by Game of Thrones, Stranger Things forgot what it was. Star Wars sequels have become a garbled mess that is a comedy for many people. And Endgame had nice payoffs, but the rest is kind of a mess. I could go on about these movies and TV shows, but we're here to talk about this messy pile in the corner. Dracula continues his campaign to punish the people of Slovakia for his wife's murder. He has enlisted the help of foreign vampire lords and ladies who are his appointed generals, with the addition of two humans who have their own goals for assisting Dracula. These humans, Hector and Isaac, are charged to oversee the war effort. Then, Lady Carmilla shows up late, but is allowed to join the war council. She attempts to rattle Dracula, manipulate Hector to do her bidding, and causes general disruptions, all to usurp Dracula's throne. Because Godbrand discovers Dracula's true intention is to kill all the humans and let the vampires starve. While this is happening, Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard set out to the ruined Belmont estate. Their goal is to open a hidden, magically sealed vault, search the vast collection of artifacts and knowledge the Belmonts collected in hopes of discovering anything that could prevent Dracula's castle from teleporting away when the heroes assault it. So, we have a setup for drama, intrigue, and a chance at a wild climax, while treason lurks in the shadows. But how did it all play out? Like a lobotomy conducted with a rusty rake. Dracula had 1 year to prepare for his attack on Slovakia. However, He addresses his generals as if they had just arrived. This is clearly done to give the viewers information about Dracula's plan to wipe out all the humans and give the land to the creatures of the night. But why would these lords and ladies travel all this way and bring their own troops when they didn't know what the plan was? They just show up because he says so? If that is the case, why? We don't know who any of them are or how they even relate to Dracula. We are not told who they are or why they see Dracula as their lord, which makes no sense at all because after Lisa was killed, Dracula said this.
1 year! It will take me 1 year to summon an army from the guts of hell itself.
He said nothing about summoning vampires from around the world, nor forge masters like Hector or Isaac. He was very clear about summoning from the pits of hell, something I can support. Instead, we are told the humans will be scoured from the land, which would imply a removal of every human from Slovakia. But Hector is under the impression this is a culling, and he doesn't question Dracula's statement. The whole removing Dracula from power plot is contingent upon Hector being under the impression this is a culling. It's the one condition he gave when Dracula asked for his help.
If humans became livestock, I would have no concern over that.
Hell, the old vampire even suggested it. If Hector knew that he was lied to, then he would have no reason to assist in the war effort. Hector wouldn't be there, and given that Dracula gives Isaac and Hector the task of conducting the war, due to them being human and still assisting, then it would be safe to assume that he would leave the task solely up to Isaac. And we find out that Isaac is fully committed to Dracula's cause and would die before being swayed. So, if Hector was gone, there would be no one close to Dracula for Carmilla to manipulate, which makes it most likely impossible to carry out her plan. Speaking of her plan, we should get into that, since it takes up a large portion of this season. And watching it play out feels like a drill through the kneecap. It all starts with Carmilla corresponding with Godbrand, which she uses to probe for weaknesses. She will have information on council meetings and any conversations that Godbrand reports. Carmilla should have time to understand what she is walking into. She first arrives alone, interrupting a council meeting, and immediately challenges Dracula's state of mind, calling him out on his war over a human pet. Clearly, this angers Dracula. And what does he do in response? Does he kill her in front of the other generals? Which is what I was hoping for. Does he pull Carmilla into a private meeting and murder her there? Or even threaten her? No, he has a civil discussion that ends with her telling a joke which Dracula finds amusing. Why did I bring this up? Because Carmilla's motivation of betrayal hinges on Dracula's state of mind. During the next council meeting, the group is at odds with the war's next plan of action. Carmilla suggests attacking Brela based on it being a port town, and taking it landlocks the humans. While the port city could be important, however, when we first see Brela, we do not see a steady stream of refugees filing into the city, or none of them are camped outside. In fact, the people of Slovakia act as though there isn't a war going on at all. Also, something else to note, Slovakia resides in what is known as modern day Romania. And as we can see here on the map, Slovakia doesn't have any large bodies of water connected to it. Some rivers, yes, but there's land in all other directions. You couldn't possibly cut off any parts of Slovakia with a port town. Carmilla's suggestion only seems like the most urgent target. However, just thinking about how much land Slovakia is connected to, she seems pretty dumb. Securing the borders would funnel the remaining people back into Slovakia. Then Dracula and his army could take care of who's left. Yet, no one brings this up. Instead, that is cut short when Dracula cautions about the danger of moving water for vampires.
There's a that now! Hey, you son bitch, water!
Until Dracula says that's enough. Then Carmilla whispers to Hector, "Do you think that's enough, Hector?" Um, their discussion wasn't getting anywhere, and no one brought up any valid points, and we never discover how moving water is really a danger. Perhaps someone could ask Dracula, or he could explain why it's a threat. This would have been the spot to set up blessing water. Then Hector speaks up, saying taking Brela would seal off part of Slovakia,
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
which Dracula responds with, "Interesting, Hector." Yes, it is interesting. Look at the map again. How much land would be cut off by water? It would have taken a simple Google search to realize this doesn't make any sense. Anyways, anything else from Dracula? No follow up comment? Not exploring the Brela idea any further? Are you going to attack? No time for that. It's Isaac's turn to talk. Isaac reports that the creatures they sent out were nearly killed by Alucard and a Belmont. I guess he forgot to mention Sypha, the seeker who can cast deadly spells, an easy oversight. This information is a surprise to everyone because they were under the impression the Belmonts were all dead. Carmilla comments that they should send a force to observe the Belmont estate. Out of the 7 generals and Dracula, only Godbrand says something, and that's why. This sends Carmilla into a rant about how the Belmonts have hunted their kind for centuries, and the Belmont could have access to the vast collection and knowledge the Belmonts had collected throughout their generations. She then turns to Dracula and asks, "This is your war council?" And that's the scene. Yes, she asked him a condescending question, while at the same time insulting the other generals right to their faces. So you're telling me that after she was finished speaking, everyone just left? Or did they freeze in place until they are needed in another scene? Carmilla created a bunch of questions and possible conflict while bringing up a good point, and it cuts away never to be brought up again. There should have been a response to her actions and words. Why would anyone believe all of them sat there silently as she grinned and then they just left the room? Maybe they all realized this is awful and cut out their tongues. That would explain why these turds never speak. And Dracula wants everyone to die, so this show can't go on any longer. The next step in Carmilla's plan is to manipulate Hector. She tries convincing him to make a small group of creatures and send it to the Belmont estate, which he responds with, "Why are you so interested in that place, anyways?"
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
Hector, you were literally feet away from her when she answered that same question in the last scene. Were you not paying attention? So now more time is wasted on her repeating previously stated suspicions, just putting it in a way that makes it sound like she is concerned for Dracula. No, Hector was there. He heard your tone, Carmilla. You don't get to do this show. You can't just forget prior scenes so she can seem cunning. If a character isn't in a shot, are they floating in a void? This would be the only explanation for his incredibly stupid question. Anyways, he agrees with Carmilla, but only if Dracula approves the plan. Does he? No, but only because they never present him with one. Why not, though? Because Hector says that Dracula is being indecisive? That isn't true, show, and you know that. Dracula doesn't respond to Carmilla in the last scene because you wrote it that way. Up until this point, he has stated the end goal of his war, appointed Hector and Isaac as his war planners, and allowed Carmilla to join the war council after speaking with her. Where has he been indecisive? Oh, but it's needed so Hector can start distrusting Dracula.
You and I are enemies now.
Next, Godbrand enters Dracula's study and asks, "If we kill all the humans, what are we going to eat?" Dracula seems annoyed by this question and maybe by Godbrand's presence. However, this time we get to hear what Dracula has to say. He states they will be taken care of: blood and cold storage, animals in the lower halls, which Godbrand responds with,
Pig blood gives me the shit. I'm sorry, but there it is.
Dracula then pins the loudmouth vampire, degrades him, and threatens him if he continues to spout out questions, which causes the undead Viking to retreat with his tail between his legs. Last time I checked, pigs are animals, so wouldn't they be included in the future meals in the lower halls? But pigs are singled out because they will help Godbrand be motivated later, and He also needed to say that he hated pig's blood in some way, so this could make sense, even though it won't, and we'll talk about that when we get there. And on top of all of that, why would Godbrand ever go for a pig? There are plenty of other animals in the world. Unless Godbrand and the other generals know about the glorious eternal night that Dracula plans to cast upon the world. If that is the case, why would any vampire agree to this? An endless night would result in the plants dying, and when they go, everything else in the food chain follows. Also, why stay here? The generals could just return home and ignore this call to arms. It's clearly stated that they are from all over the world, so it has to be true. This is no longer punishment for the people of Slovakia, but instead Dracula wants to kill all humans across the world. If that is the case, then my above question of why any vampire would follow this is echoed. They surely all can't be that dumb to follow him blindly into the grave. Godbrand passes by Carmilla on his way out of Dracula's study. Then the crude Viking tells her that Dracula is starving himself and is going to do the rest to all of them. Godbrand then blows off Carmilla when she clearly shows that she wants to continue the conversation. So, does she grab him to get his attention? Does she push him up against a wall and state that she wasn't done speaking with him? Does she run in front of him and demand that they talk further? None of the above. Instead, she kicks him down a flight of stairs, and once he reaches the bottom, she jumps onto his chest. This doesn't kill him, however, it was clearly painful. He asks why she did that, and then we receive her motivation. Centuries ago, she was turned and bound to a vampire who promised her the world, every dark creature's dream. Anyways, I need to stop here quickly. Bound? In what way? Did you have to stay within a certain range of him? Were you tied closely to him? Did she have to do as he commanded? Knowing this will help the audience understand the context to the situation. She speaks harshly of him, saying that his promise died as he grew old, cruel, and mad. The best way to grow. So, is it safe to assume that things were good before then? Maybe there were some fond memories? Surely she would put him out of his misery, perhaps while he slept, or make it a quick and respectful end in the memory of him before he lost his mind? No, she strips him naked, places a bladed noose around his neck, and tosses him out a window. He is decapitated, causing his head and lifeless body to fall into a snowy ravine. She isn't going to bow down to cruel, mad, old men anymore. And while she did give her lord one last wild ride, she really gave no examples of his cruelty. In fact, she demonstrated two acts of this by kicking Godbrand down the stairs and what she did to her former lord. For someone that detests such a thing, you gladly dish it out, Carmilla. Next is the payoff for that pig's blood comment. Godbrand wakes from a pointless dream and conveniently is sitting in what looks like a dining hall already. I guess the animation department was low on budget. To celebrate his killing of a few humans, the Viking calls for beer and blood. That's when a pig is brought into him, which brings a frown to his face. Then he proclaims that Carmilla is right. Well, no, she isn't correct at all. You, Godbrand, are the one that figured it out. And honestly, I don't understand why you're not currently recruiting the other generals. Also, why are pigs being brought up already? I thought those were a last resort. What about the cold storage or other animals? This is an awful payoff without any thought about Dracula's words, making it seem like he lied about the cold storage. Please understand that jokes and payoffs should never come at the expense of a consistent story. Also, Dracula, if you're going to pull off this world altering event in secret, then you need to do everything you can to obfuscate your true intentions. You could have always summoned me, Dracula. I would have gladly helped with your endeavor. And because of all of this, it's no wonder that Carmilla and Godbrand know what you're up to. And honestly, it's surprising it took this long to figure out. Anyways, Godbrand and the nameless mute generals go on a feeding raid, which just means go kill every human in a nearby town and feed to your delight. That's all that happens. Mindless killing, doing nothing for the plot or character development. And while I do enjoy the blood and gore, I always feel that there should be meaning behind it, something to build up to, something that digs deep within the soul and climaxes all over. How about instead of blood and gore for no reason, we learn about these generals? They have yet to speak, and we are deep into this season. Also, this is a redundant scene, since Dracula already mentioned that he allows them to go on feeding raids. Time is very limited in this season, and showing something that is already known to happen is not a good use of time. If you're so intent on this scene, allow the generals to discuss current events. Show us what they are thinking. How much do they trust their lord at this point? Give them personality. This could be the point where Godbrand exposes Dracula's true intentions. So, the manipulation of Hector intensifies when he and Carmilla are discussing going against Dracula's wishes. She states that Dracula failed his people and thinks he was in love, but he really only took a pet. Is he really the mad one? Carmilla, do you not understand the world? Or have you never been attached to somebody? Yes, people get sad when they lose a pet, but they can always bury it in that old Indian cemetery hoping that it'll come back to life. But they are devastated when they lose a loved one. It would make sense he would be like this. Dracula has shown a disdain for humans. He shuts himself off from the human world. The church was invented by humans, which brought about Lisa's death. He sees no value in people, and they only bring suffering. Clearly, this isn't constructive, and he needs some help. Carmilla says that Dracula didn't even try to protect Lisa, making it seem as though she didn't mean much to him. He was traveling slowly, trying to live as a man.
You were traveling?
I was. The way men do. Slowly.
Because it's what Lisa asked him to do, to give the humans a chance. Did the writers not watch the first season? Wouldn't Dracula tell his friends what happened? How is Hector so clueless? She tells Hector that Dracula is going to kill him. Since the goal is to kill all humans, the young Forge Master will not be spared. I bet you'll never guess what Hector does about this statement. Did you guess he would do with the smart making
Brain am winning again! I am the greatest! Mwah!
and never question Dracula about this? Yes, how consistently stupid. There seems to be an effect that comes from this castle that makes everyone inside progressively dumber. It seems he has become a living plot putty that goes along with what the story wants him to do and to be, no longer containing any logical thought, reason, or wit that we saw in the first episode. Next, she makes a declaration that Hector joined Dracula's campaign for greatness and joy. Hector can reanimate the dead. If only I had that. Anyways, he can shape their bodies to his will, and they are fully loyal to him. Hector also states that he loves his work, so he doesn't need Dracula for either greatness or joy. He could easily stroll into a graveyard at night, raise a small group of creatures, attack a nearby town or village, raise the dead from that engagement, and slowly increase the size of his army, allowing him to strike higher populated targets until his forces range in the thousands. People would see this, they would talk about his army, they would even make up myths. So, Carmilla, you're wrong. In none of his conversations did Hector once bring up wanting greatness or joy. Carmilla then demands that Hector convince their lord to attack Brela. Yet, Dracula is never allowed to give his opinion on this battle plan. Maybe if the scene where she suggested all of this wasn't cut short, then we would know exactly what Dracula thinks.
Inconvenient.
Anyways, I'm wondering why go through all of this trouble? Carmilla and Godbrand could just wait until Dracula was weak and then they could strike. Their troops could gather as many humans as they need to stay fed and strike when the time is right. At some point, they would be able to overpower him, and sooner if they convince the other generals to join their cause, which I'm sure they would agree it's far better than starving to death. This seems like the most likely outcome given this new revelation. It takes Hector being a mindless plot device who never questions Dracula to believe Carmilla. And because Dracula says that Hector is easy to lie to, we are all supposed to just accept that Hector believes her. While Carmilla works on Hector, Godbrand speaks to Isaac, telling him,
Well, talking about choices, Carmilla's making a lot of sense to me.
of course she does, because no one else has made any sense at all. He tells Isaac the generals should just run the war and Dracula can sit in his study. And if the old man has any issues with it, then they will put him down. And with that said, Isaac rips Godbrand's throat open and then stakes him in a glorious, beautiful assault. But what did Godbrand expect to happen? How much does he really know Isaac? Does he know it would be safe to make this statement? Did he never once think that the Forge Master would be against betraying Dracula? What a flawless plan. At this point, Carmilla is treating Hector like a puppy learning new tricks, praising him for suggestions, even though it's clear that's what she wants, which leads Hector to talking Isaac and Dracula into the Brela plan. With everything in place, Carmilla gives her troops the word to take Brela and set up an ambush for Dracula. Now that the trap is set, the last thing that is needed is for Hector to make a small force to send to the Belmont estate. Once the castle arrives at Brela, Dracula's army starts to cross a bridge that leads into the city. At the same time, Carmilla and Hector are on the shore near the river with the reanimated bishop from season 1. The former holy man is commanded to walk into the river and cast a spell that blesses it. How? It seems that they need a spell only a holy person can cast. However, this is no longer a human or anything holy at all. It's just a husk of a human, nothing more. And the fact that this undead creature bursts into flames suggests that there is no trace of a righteous church figure in there. So, how can he still be holy in order to bless the river and yet burn up in the holy water? It would also be a good idea to explain the range on this spell. The spell seems to cover a large portion of the river, maybe even the whole thing. It reaches the collapsed bridge to burn up Dracula's troops, and water is thrown all over the place, burning up Carmilla's troops when Sypha attempts to wrestle the castle to her location. Does this only affect a portion of the river? Does it extend out into the sea? Is it a small area that's carried downstream? Is that why running water is dangerous to vampires? This is all important because if one man of God can bless an entire river, then several should be capable of spreading holy water across their lands. And judging from how the church conducts themselves, this would have already been done. With the spell complete, Carmilla's troops pulled the bridge from under Dracula's ground forces. The generals escape, however, the rest are not so lucky. Unfortunate combatants fall into the river and are beautifully immolated in blue, bright, wonderful burning flames. If we had any idea of how bad of a resource loss this is, then we could understand the severity of the situation. Also, where are all the creatures of the night? Many of them can fly, and with Forge Masters, any of them can, and they are flying around when Dracula's forces attempt to invade Brela. But now they're gone. Also, I'm still wondering why Carmilla never spoke with the other generals and explained what Dracula was planning. She brought up the possibility of there being three other females being too scared to speak because of posturing man children. But she isn't going to do anything to assist them out of their current situation. She's just going to kill them when they defend Dracula. You brought this up, Carmilla, and the best you can do for them is talk about their situation? That sounds pretty familiar to a lot of other things I've heard. Talking about the plight of people, but yet doing nothing about it. If you want to stop people from being hurt, then you need to come to my house and actually stop me. So Dracula moves his castle, right? The whole goal of the heroes is to prevent any movement of Dracula's home.
They tried for centuries to eliminate its main advantage. It transports itself through magical means.
But he doesn't. He instead joins the generals to fight off their attackers. Now that we've reached this point, do we really think that her plan will work? Dracula and all five of his generals are still alive. Something tells me that they would shred through Carmilla's generic vampire troops. Does Carmilla plan to take all of them on? Before any of that can happen, Sypha wrestles the castle to her location. But, as I said before, during the struggle, the castle lands in the water, sending tidal waves up onto the shore, burning away Carmilla's army. Hector and Carmilla take refuge, and for some reason, he doesn't push her in the water when it's right next to her. And then on top of that, he stays next to her with no thought of her being a vampire and being unable to chase him in the daylight. Also, we see a bunch of people inside the city. I guess Carmilla's troops didn't do a good job of taking it, did they? Well, if they're there, then Hector, have them bring a bunch of fire so Carmilla can be extra warm. But no, he makes the logical decision to stay there so she can beat him into submission and put a leash and collar on him. She tells him, "You're going to make me an army." The last we see of them, she is leaving on horseback, with Hector having to walk behind her like an animal. Wow, the themes, how poetic. Even though it took the lack of logic or any thought process to reach this point. But, well, those themes, right? Isn't it great that Carmilla is a crusader against cruelty and has never once been cruel? Also, if these creatures are fully loyal to Hector, and he is making an army of them, does she not realize that he could just command them to attack her? She really doesn't think, does she? During the time everyone in the castle is at odds, the trio of heroes travel to Trevor's family estate. Honestly, these are some of the best scenes in this season, and I wish there were more. Even though at times it wobbles like that bum I hit in the back of the head with a baseball bat. It's enjoyable to watch the dynamic of a well spoken, educated, and stoic Alucard clashing with a blunt, closed off, and at times rude Trevor. The sad thing is that Sypha, who is wise for her age, smart, and keeps her counterparts on track, doesn't have an arc at all. She is great from the beginning to the very end, and we'll discuss that a little more later. Their path leads to the magically sealed vault. Sypha and Alucard figure out a way to open it because Trevor was too young to be taught the opening ritual when the estate was destroyed. Inside, they search for any information which would allow them to anchor Dracula's castle. Armies can't assault it because he can just teleport it away. Unless it's Carmilla's army, then he stays and fights. How special of her. While Sypha and Alucard search the vast library and collection, Trevor finds the famed and powerful Morning Star behind a broken bookshelf. Why would he find something so powerful so conveniently? Remember how the hidden trove is magically sealed? Conveniently, the troops that arrive are perfect for opening this specific door. On the door is a language that is nearly extinct. How did Carmilla know exactly what would be needed? She didn't even know it was at the estate. She had no clue where the collection was or even if it existed. Sure, she's confident that it exists, but she had no proof of it since she has stated that people had searched for it and never found it.
Then it may have access to the trove of weapons and magical materials talked of across generations but never found.
But if it was at the estate the whole time and people searched for it, then why didn't she search for it if her hunch has always been that it's at the estate? And the creatures find it pretty quickly. So I feel that she could have broken in here years ago. Anyways, Trevor defeats the invaders while Sypha and Alucard force Dracula's castle to their location. Once the task is complete, they crash the battle already underway inside. Dracula and Isaac retreat as all the vampires band together against the heroes. What follows is a fun and enjoyable action scene where there is some well placed fanfare as the protagonists demonstrate their abilities and teamwork, dispatching the remaining vampire forces, including nearly every general. Isaac stands in front of Dracula, willing to give up his life to protect the value of Dracula's knowledge. Touched by this super crazy and cruel Dracula tosses Isaac through a magic mirror into another part of the world, saving his life. I've never seen Such a disgusting madman. This leads to the final showdown where Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard trade blows with the ancient vampire. They assault Dracula, giving him their best shots, launching spells, Alucard attacking with his sword, and Trevor striking out with his Morning Star. Even with all of that, they cannot seem to weaken him, and the best the Morning Star does is stagger Dracula for a moment. Dracula attempts to finish the heroes off with one final attack. However, with teamwork, they repel it, which causes Alucard and Dracula to become separated from Trevor and Sypha. The battle then turns into a bare knuckled brawl and rages throughout the castle, ending in Alucard's room. Alucard is thrown through the wall, crashing into his bed, and Dracula steps inside, poised to kill his son. But he pauses as he looks around, and memories of raising his child with Lisa come flooding back. He realizes that he is killing the greatest gift his wife ever gave him.
Your greatest gift to me. And I'm killing it.
Overwhelmed, he breaks down and allows Alucard to stake him. Amusingly, Alucard takes his sweet time doing this. This is like saying, I'll mercy kill this animal, but instead hit it with 100 small rocks before using a big one. Just look at how long it takes him to push the stake through. Oh, brings back memories. The father and son share a few moments before this happens, and after, Trevor bursts in, decapitating Dracula, and Sypha burns the corpse away. After the battle, Sypha and Trevor decide to travel together, helping people in need. Alucard is given the Belmont estate, including the vault. He is asked to take care of it, fix it up, make both of their homes one home, which Alucard gladly accepts. That's the story. The heroes find a new life after Dracula. Carmilla and Hector are building an army. At the same time, Isaac is starting to build his own. I wonder if there'll be a clash in the next season. The biggest thing that jumps out here is Dracula's castle. He can use a device to teleport it to seemingly any location. Being able to teleport armies instantly is powerful alone, but the castle is devastating when it lands. A large radius of force emits outwards, displaces water, rips skin, muscle, and sinew from bones. The war could be won in just a few months with a moderately sized army. Just land the castle in the city of a town or village, let the shock wave wreak havoc, and then have your army attack. Honestly, this should have been his strategy from the beginning. Next up is the device Alucard mentions about blocking out the sun, leaving everything in an eternal darkness.
The darkening clouds and making them as permanent in the air as the frost of the north. Great, strange flying machines that pull shrouds across the sky to block out the sun.
Okay, while that sounds lovely, I don't believe it would happen. How would it even work? Because blocking out the sun over a large landmass seems like a monumental task. But the whole world? That seems impossible. But for the sake of the argument, let's say that he can do this. Then just do that. Activate it and teleport away where no one can find you and wait for everything to die. Seems pretty simple to me. Even with those two things, the biggest, worst blemish upon this show is the wasted time. The very first scene is completely redundant and takes up 7 minutes and 23 seconds. The scene is of Lisa before her death. She is using medicine to heal an old woman. The church shows up, takes her, burns the house and Lisa for witchcraft. We already knew this transpired. These events were very clear from season 1. Dracula arrives at the smoldering ruins of his and Lisa's home. The old lady Lisa was healing tells him the church had taken her and she would be dead by now, which turns out to be correct because Dracula arrives far too late. This does nothing for the story. You gave time to something that's already been told. Stop. Just stop it. You have 8 episodes at around 20 minutes apiece. You really don't have time for this. I have to say, though, it is a real shame, and it feels like it should have been put into season 1. Maybe they couldn't finish it in time, because it shows how the holy men react to even simple mechanical objects, calling them the devil's tools. And I'll have you know, those tools are in my closet. Twisting anything that she says into something evil.
It has nothing to do with any god or...
Nothing to do with God.
Remember the church? The organization that doesn't get expanded upon in this season? I'm really glad that the writers used what was left for them from last season. You see, one of the successes of the first season is it's focused. It has a minimal amount of characters and a straightforward story that didn't have needless scenes. It's perfect for a short runtime. Now, I'm not saying that one cannot add 8 new characters, give them time to develop some, while still handling the characters from a prior season. It just gets a lot harder the less time you have to work with. Therefore, it's a bad idea to add 5 uniquely powered characters and give them the title of General, because they end up with no lines of dialogue and no development. Sure, they are present during times when it would make sense, but they never give any input, which that doesn't make any sense. How about during the first debate where Hector and Isaac can't agree upon the logistics of the war? Not a word from them. Or how about when Carmilla insults them all? You know, the scene, that famous hard cut scene where nothing was resolved? Yet, the only time these generals do anything is the feeding raid and when they die. These generals could be removed completely. You could get rid of the feeding raid and change the battle before the climactic conflict. This will save about 2 minutes and 13 seconds. That can be used for actual characters and ones that have lines of dialogue and are doing something for the plot. That puts our wasted time up to 9 minutes and 56 seconds. And there is still more to come. Remember when Carmilla suggests to Hector that he should send a force to the Belmont estate, and then he questions her interest in the place?
Why are you so fascinated by that?
Yes, this counts as wasted time as well. At the very end of the prior episode, Carmilla already explained her concerns of the estate clearly. Hector was present for this. This takes away from the scene because instead of showing Carmilla's cunning, both her and Hector come across as stupid. That increases the wasted time to 10 minutes and 36 seconds. Next is when Dracula explains why he chose Hector and Isaac to make the battle plans for his war. Right after he had just explained the same thing to Godbrand.
The only two generals in my court who are not driven by thirst. The only two who are bound by loyalty and intellect.
Which Isaac and Hector were both present for. But then again, the writers make characters look stupid so scenes can happen. So, more time wasted on redundancies. We could skip this first part of the conversation between those three and jump right to the additional information we are given, where Dracula says that Hector and Isaac both hate their own kind. Yes, I figured they did. Otherwise, it would be pretty strange that they would be assisting you with this plan. The reason for their motivations here would be far more helpful. We'll get into the flashbacks and the little snippets of audio that do develop their motivation, although just let me say that only Isaac's makes sense. Because we are talking about two humans who hate their kind so much. One wants all of them to die, and the other is perfectly fine with humans being treated like cattle. Anyways, 2 minutes gone down the drain, moving the timer up to 12 minutes and 36 seconds. That's half an episode, and we're not done yet. The next waste is when Godbrand has a dream where he kills some humans and he wakes up inside the mess hall. This is the scene where the pig is brought in. Right after Dracula had just spoke of other sources of blood being available. Get rid of this being the motivation for Godbrand. He already figured out his lord's plan and should already be acting upon it. Besides, Dracula's lie is supposed to be working. Why wouldn't he keep that lie going and actually have blood in cold storage? So now it seems that Dracula is stupid as well. But the pointless feeding rate has to happen. So fuck your logic, and we're gonna bring a pig in. Getting rid of this would save a minute and 54 seconds, jumping our timer up to 12 minutes and 30 seconds. Then we get 3 minutes and 30 seconds of Dracula killing 40 men who insulted him, and the point being that he used to enjoy killing and would make a spectacle of it. This is accurate and in line with Dracula. At the very first episode of season 1, Lisa mentions all the bodies impaled outside, which Dracula responds with,
Stop putting them on sticks.
I gave that up a long time ago.
why couldn't he have just said that same thing that he said to Lisa, but to Hector and Isaac? Why did we have to watch this scene? There is no point to it. We understood what he meant. It's more wasted time for gore's sake. Anyways, that pushes the counter up to 18 minutes, just 4 minutes shy of a full episode. All of that time could have been used to develop those mute generals if the writers are so intent on them being in the show. Use it to flesh out the motivations for Hector. If any time is left, give it to Dracula so his character isn't this worthless, broken thing that sits in a chair. The most frustrating thing is that there is normally a good story hidden inside a bad one. The key is to make multiple drafts and refine as you go, and realize when a concept isn't working to get rid of it and trim unnecessary scenes so you can focus on the ones that matter to your story. This will allow you to maintain logical consistency and not run into the issue of using language that is not consistent with keeping a lie, aka Dracula saying, "We are going to kill the people of Slovakia." Then, in the same scene, "We are in the business of wiping humanity from the face of the earth." I shouldn't have to point out how this can't happen within a story and be taken seriously. Dracula is hiding the fact that he is going to kill the humans and let the vampires starve, including himself. He also tells Hector that it will be a culling. It's later revealed that Isaac knows exactly what Dracula intends. And from how Godbrand speaks, the vampires know at least about removing all the humans, leaving out how dumb it is for any of them to follow Dracula still. How would this not come up during a war council? Wouldn't Hector start to get suspicious when they were halfway through with their campaign and no humans were being taken into custody? And on top of all of that, it brings up another little issue. Dracula, if you know Hector is naive and only understands animal analogies, then why wouldn't you keep an eye on him? Always have someone or something listening. You're deceiving him for your own advantage, and you think of him as a friend. Maybe make sure he doesn't learn of your great lie or that no one else manipulates him. Hector is completely wasted in this season. The first time we see him, he is stoic, poised, and when questioned, he demonstrates wit by insulting Godbrand. The Viking brings up how chaotic the war has been and suggests some sort of organization. In Hector's eyes, Godbrand brings up a good point. A calling should have order. So it's reasonable for him to question their current tactics. Because he is reasonable, he brings this concern up during a war council. But all of those features and qualities fall away the moment Carmilla arrives. I spoke about the scene where she manipulates Hector and bends him to do her bidding. His character breaks here because where he was acting reasonably before, now he acts based upon things we haven't seen and just her word. He takes no action to question Dracula, his friend, for over a year, and instead blindly follows Carmilla. This shouldn't be the behavior of a top appointed general. There is no reason for Hector to withhold information of Carmilla's attempts at treason. Instead, he shifts to only understanding things where he can draw a correlation to animals, and he is easy to lie to. He wants joy and recognition. Then he just accepts every lie Carmilla tells him. Even with all of that, the worst part is his weak motivation. And no, I'm not counting the made up joy and greatness that Carmilla said. He is perfectly fine with humans being treated like herd animals. However, the show doesn't give enough reasons as to why. There is a small moment where we hear the voice of his parents and discover they are awful people to him, and they don't want him.
I never wanted you, Hector. You sicken me. Do you understand? The moment you came out of me, I knew you were wrong.
Alchemy is for money and power, boy. Money and power and buying our safety are all that matters. This is the way things are. Now get away from me.
Then we get a flashback where he reanimates a dog, brings it home, which causes his mother to scream. That is it. We are given nothing else to go on. Parents bad, so all people bad. Well, maybe not all, so keep some around, but I dislike them enough to where their sole purpose is to be a vampire's meal. Because animals. It would have been pretty simple. Perhaps he was shunned from his town and branded with a sign that signifies him as cursed. He ends up getting chased out of places until he finds a way to hide the mark. He settles down, makes friends, starts a relationship, and then is found out. That's when everyone turns on him and he barely escapes with his life. It's not the best idea, but it's something to make him spiteful and to hate humans, but not enough to where he wants them all to die. The other issue with Hector is the thing he possesses, the coins that allow him to raise the dead. He is shown as a child using them, but where did they come from? I sure would like to get me a couple coins like that. How does he know how to use them? Are they just a catalyst? It's never made clear, and the only thing we know is that he is called a Forge Master. They can raise the dead, change the physical appearance of anything that is reanimated, and those creatures are completely loyal. But it's important to point out how they use their power. Hector has the coins, and Isaac uses a dagger. If these items are used to channel the power, can it be any item? Or does the wielder need to have an affinity to the object? These are things that a writer should want to point out. It helps flesh out the world, lets us know how rare these items or people are, and what they are fully capable of. Magic can be a fun device to use in a story. However, it must be clear on what it does and who can wield it. Rules allow the audience to understand why a spell behaves the way it does, or how one wields the spell. In the end, Hector had a lot of places he could have went as a character, but it went down one of the worst paths possible. I still hope he makes that army for Carmilla and then has it attack her. But knowing how these writers are, I don't see that happening. Isaac's motivation is handled far better than Hector's. There is a flashback where Isaac is being flogged by his master. The reason is because Isaac was touching things he wasn't supposed to. It's then revealed that Isaac was doing this to help his master and out of love. The master pauses, shares his feelings of love with Isaac.
You too. That's why I do this. This is how I love you.
Crushed by this revelation, Isaac surprise attacks his master and kills him. The other bit of information we receive is a line of dialogue. He was broken by a man he loved and was treated poorly by other humans and only found refuge with an undead creature.
The only person in the world who ever lifted a hand to protect me from anything. And he was not a human.
It makes sense that Isaac follows Dracula and is completely loyal to him. And through all of his experiences, he sees humans as worthless filth. He is mostly consistent throughout the story. The only two times he seems off is during the first council meeting when they are discussing attacking places. Isaac's choice is because of power, but power can be measured in many ways, and Isaac never specifies what type of power this would be. The other time is when Dracula speaks of possible betrayal, and Isaac responds that if there was anyone plotting against Dracula, the Forge Master would take care of it without his lord knowing. That doesn't make sense. It would be important to know that Godbrand said that Carmilla was starting to make sense, and then brings up the idea of forcing Dracula to step aside. Carmilla and the other generals were implicated by Godbrand.
Well, talking about choices, Carmilla's making a lot of sense to me. I'm saying it may be time for the old man to sit in his study and let the rest of us take care of this for him.
Yet, Isaac never picked up on that. Isaac is driven, speaks clearly, and makes his every action have meaning. He flogs himself to remain disciplined. He doesn't meander, and yet he conveniently steps out of his character when Carmilla is involved. This is a good start to Isaac, and hopefully he can be fleshed out further next season, which I wish I could say the same for Carmilla. It's clear what the writers were going for with her. However, it's so poorly written and comes across as convenient and at times devoid of logic. I'm not saying that a character shouldn't be the beneficiary of luck or convenience, but when their cunning and ability to manipulate is supplemented by this luck and convenience, then that character fails. Carmilla's plan relies on Hector never speaking to Dracula about her words or actions. This is hard to swallow, and no, I don't care that Dracula said it's easy to lie to Hector. Any functioning adult would go speak to their friend if a new person showed up talking poorly about them. See, it's convenient that Hector never once went to speak to Dracula. How about when Dracula is standing outside Hector's workspace and yet doesn't speak to his general about why Hector's demeanor has changed? It's very convenient that Dracula then speaks to Isaac about Hector and not Hector directly. It's convenient that the dead bishop from season 1 was brought into Hector's workshop even before Carmilla arrives. And from season 1, his face and head shouldn't even be in one piece. Watch this scene. Without the holy corpse, the water at Brela couldn't be blessed. So her plan hangs on something she needs that just happens to be brought in. What would she have done if the cardinal wasn't there, or had already been changed into a creature of the night? It was there since episode 1 and wasn't used until the second to last episode. How convenient it is that Hector left the body alone all this time he has been working. Or wasn't he? I don't know. The show doesn't give a shit about providing the size of Dracula's army. It's convenient that Dracula doesn't just move his castle when it's under attack. Convenient that Hector doesn't just make a large force of creatures and have them attack Carmilla. Convenient that Hector didn't just flee during the day when Carmilla couldn't chase him. That's a lot of conveniences, but I'm proving a point here. Characters in this castle don't act as they had been established or act illogically without a tangible reason to do so, only to paint Carmilla as cunning and intelligent. Carmilla didn't have a well thought out plan. Things just happened because the writers wanted it that way. She is supposed to be cunning, strong willed, and assertive. While the last two are true, however, the only reason she isn't a pile of ash on the floor is convenience. She is meant to seem intelligent by bringing up attacking Brela because it's a port town and will cut off escape from Slovakia without considering the vast amounts of land paths that lead out of the region. Just thinking about it for a few moments, and she doesn't seem so intelligent. She was correct about the Belmont collection at the estate, but how did she know what creatures would be required to open it? So everything just falls into place for her, and her motivation is based upon not following mad, cruel old men. Yet she demonstrates cruelty consistently, even more than Dracula, the one who is supposed to be cruel, or at least that's what the show says. I get that she is to be disliked, and it's clear she is being set up as the main villain for season 3. However, she isn't likable and has no good qualities. We don't have to agree with an antagonist's actions, but it should have understandable meaning to it. Like Dracula, he lost the only woman he ever loved to a witch trial. He allowed her in to study alchemy and medicine.
I want to heal people. I want to learn. Will you help me?
She wasn't interested in bettering herself for her own gain, but because she wished to assist those in need. He had never met another human like her.
Definitely different to most humans I have met in recent times.
She captivated him, gave the old vampire perspective, and yet her death was at the hands of those she wished to heal. Humans killed the one good thing in the world in Dracula's eyes. And on top of how he already had a disdain for humans, his response is that all humans must die. No more suffering or hatred, just peace and silence. You see, we don't agree with how he is responding to this situation, yet we can empathize with him. He had his chance at a loving life ripped away by those he was giving a chance to. Having someone you love taken by something so stupid and avoidable is relatable because it happens all the time. Carmilla, on the other hand, was bound to a vampire. The binding is never explained, so we have no clear rules on how this works, and we can't draw a relation to something. If you wanted a feeling of being held against your will, then make it clear, show it, give examples. No, instead, you get a little exposition and everyone is supposed to feel sorry for her. She says he became a cruel, mad man, but it's never shown, and the only time he is on screen is when Carmilla is being cruel and murdering him. Carmilla is never treated poorly, or at least shown to be treated poorly, and instead, we only see her heartlessness. So, why would anyone be invested in this character? Carmilla's perfectly timed dramatic entrance into the show, her challenging Dracula's authority, insulting generals, and trying to enact plans using Dracula's resources without his knowledge are all done prior to finding out Dracula's true intentions. My question is why disrupt the council? Yes, I could understand that some is grandstanding to shake Hector's trust, but by doing this, she should have caused the other generals to dislike her. This doesn't happen, and instead, only Hector is affected. Besides, remember, Hector is a dumb child and is easy to sway. So she didn't need to cause waves at all. If one is conducting a covert operation, then the best idea is to not rock the boat. In a logical world, the other generals would have reacted to the insults, and Dracula would have condemned her. She never attempts to sway the other generals to her side, so why doesn't she make the other generals question their lord's state of mind and sway them to her cause? Which is possible while not insulting them. She would most likely need their assistance, because why would anyone think Carmilla could kill Dracula? Even while weakened, he took a vicious assault from the heroes, and still he was poised to finish off the strongest one. On top of all of that, his power is shown in season 1, and it seems vast. Just take a look. What did Carmilla think she could do against that? The only thing that we are shown from her is she moves between some shadows and blindsided Godbrand, kicking him down the stairs. Oh, I almost forgot. She did beat up Hector, the adult child. If you want people to be invested in the stakes, then you need to make them clear. Never understanding her capabilities or the size of hers and Dracula's armies means that people are trying to fill in this information. If it's perceived that she has little to no chance just by how the generals fear Dracula, even while weakened, then the stakes are so little no one thinks that she would ever win. That's all I can say. I'm sure there's more about her that's bad, but I can't do it anymore. It's as if the writers found out about all the things I've done and they were intentionally torturing me with all of this as punishment. Next, we have Dracula, the supposed antagonist of the show. He is lifted up as a god among mere mortals, and even normal vampires don't come close to his power, knowledge, and wisdom. So, what did we get with this character? We are told he is mad, cruel, and can't make up his mind. However, he clearly makes up his mind, appointing Hector and Isaac to oversee the war effort, and clearly explains a reason for this. He grows angry with Carmilla, yet has a civil discussion with her. He even saves the life of his friend. Does any of this sound like a cruel madman? He does threaten Godbrand, but Godbrand is an annoying character and says stupid things throughout the show. So it would make sense that Dracula would threaten him, especially if Godbrand is probing in an area that Dracula doesn't want him to be probing in. But it seems as though the writers forgot that somebody needs to figure out Dracula's plan, and so Godbrand does it, and they just shoved that scene in. And what about that famous hard cut scene where Carmilla insults everyone in the hall? There is no response from Dracula, which is a great use of his character and working with what was given from the first season. So it's strange the show says he is a certain thing, and yet he acts opposite of that. He has no proper arc here. He is just around and says very little that's worthwhile. Then snaps to his senses, seeing Alucard's room at the climax, giving him nothing to work with. No struggle, nothing where he weighs the consequences of what he's doing. There was so much potential from season 1 because the last we see him, he angrily unleashed his hordes upon Loakia. No one knows what transpired during that time, and there's a lot that can be done. Instead, we get a depressed, suicidal Dracula. The only thing he cares about is killing everything. It's no longer just a punishment for the people of Loakia, but why did that change? He clearly addressed the people of the land.
1 year, then I'll wipe all human life from the land of Wallachia.
He even told the old woman that Lisa healed to take her family and leave Loakia.
They do this last kindness in her name. Take your family and leave Wallachia tonight.
It was his last act of kindness in his wife's name. Why the change? Because story wants to introduce useless generals, then focus on Carmilla and not Dracula and the heroes? So he becomes barely confrontational and, oddly enough, doesn't keep tabs on his generals. This all seems terribly stupid. The only thing he is emo, and there's no point to care. I'm glad he was made so impotent in his own castle. No growth, just a stick in the mud inside a sweltering swamp. The only change that comes of him is near the end, when he instantly snaps to his senses and dies. It's such a wasted character, and nothing can be done with him because he's dead. Wait, what's that? Disney Star Wars?
No one's ever really gone.
No one's ever really gone? Then I need to check those bodies under the floorboard. Sypha is another character that had wasted potential. I already talked about her prior, and there were chances for her to have a proper arc. But she stays the same person throughout the show from start to end. Even though this is the first time in her life that she will be away from her family, which is merely a setup for a joke and never comes up again. She adjusts so quickly, and it's a real missed opportunity because this could be something that affects her attitude, her battle performance, and ability to cipher some of the books inside the Belmont vault. Give her some faults. She can still be badass and have flaws. She always knows what to say and how to perfectly deal with Alucard and Trevor. They both immediately like her, and she never fails. Yes, her counterparts don't fail in battle. However, they both have character flaws. Stop turning my fucking waifu into a Mary Sue. That's all I can say about her. It's sad, but it's true. And hopefully, she gets a bit more character development going forward. When we first see Alucard, he is well spoken, educated, and is driven to see his father killed for his mother's sake. He treats Trevor differently than Sypha. This is simple jesting with Trevor at first, which the Belmont prods back. Then Trevor becomes annoyed as if Alucard is trolling him, and if we look back at their interactions before this becomes an issue, they both laugh at one another's jokes.
He shouldn't die. Yes, fuck you.
These types of jokes don't change in tone either. Because of those things, why would anyone assume Alucard and Trevor dislike one another? But Trevor says it's pissing him off now. I guess that's all we need. It's not really explored and is resolved in the next episode. On top of that, there was a real opportunity to explore Alucard struggling with the fact that he must kill his father. I mean, some people do struggle with that. Some. This shouldn't be an easy thing for him to do. He speaks highly of his dad and how it's a tragedy that Dracula must die. This could have been something that haunts the young vampire throughout the show until the final showdown with Dracula. At times, he seems like a measured adult who understands the world and what must be done. And other times, he shifts into a whiny teenager that is only interested in giving Trevor shit. There was a lot of potential with Alucard, but it fell way short. Trevor is given the most development of the three heroes. We learn about his parents' past while visiting the ruined Belmont estate. He speaks fondly of a tree they pass by when they close in on the estate. Trevor says it was his fort, a ship, whatever he wanted it to be. His childhood rushing back, lowering his emotional defenses. And this moment is topped off with him giving his childhood a sorrowful but yet grateful goodbye. We also find out that he was on his own since the age of 13. This gives us better insight as to why he pushes people away, drinks heavily, and prefers to stay out of others' affairs. It seems that growing up was rough for Trevor, and being the last Belmont was even rougher, considering he had to hide it from the church and others for the fear of them killing him. Trevor learns to open himself up with Sypha sticking next to him, joking with him, asking him questions, and treating him like a human. Probably the first time since losing his family. He offers a shivering and lonely Sypha his blanket.
My dusty old sheet is big enough for two. And nobody was ever lonely in this house.
The old Trevor would have made up an excuse not to share this blanket. They talk about Alucard, and she gives him better insight and perspective on the half vampire. His last gesture, showing that he has completed his arc, is giving the Belmont vault to Alucard.
I bequeath you the Belmont Hold. Make that and the castle your home, not your grave.
Alucard is all alone at this point, his mother and father both dead, having to cope with that idea inside of a large, lonely castle. Trevor understands how Alucard feels, having lost his family as well. Tending to and learning from the knowledge held within the vault will give the half vampire purpose. My only issue is something that I've stated before. He finds the legendary Morningstar whip behind a broken bookcase. This weapon causes any creature it hits to explode into flames. He just pops open the chest, and there it is.
What?
It will be quick. There isn't much here. And what is here is lazy. Godbrand is a Viking. He says that the generals were summoned from all across the world, and each one of them wears attire that to specific regions in that time period. Carmilla brings up the Greeks. Trevor mentions that the Belmonts are from France, and the story takes place in an area of what is known as modern day Romania. This season doesn't build on the church, the organization that was a force in last season. They had influence over the people to the point where they acted with impunity. Sure, plenty died in the first wave in season 1, but their structure couldn't have been completely decimated. There are plenty of places that are untouched. So what happened to them? No diving into their power structure? What are they currently doing? Or are they even aware of the war? Just like the church, the power structure of the humans is never brought up. We don't get to find out how many lords or ladies are still ruling. Who has the largest army? Are they banding together? Do they know about the attacks at all? They should, considering Dracula gave everyone in Slovakia a year warning before his attack. So there is no excuse for them not knowing. Having none of this information and no insight to anyone's resources kills the stakes. During the whole season, 2 places are attacked? Does that mean that attacking some places would pose an actual threat? Is there a lack of troops? And how many people are still left and resisting? We know nothing of what their war effort has accomplished. How many places have fallen? Nothing but a mention of it seeming like they are lashing out randomly. Thank you. I appreciate that ambiguous statement. It still doesn't inform anyone of the progress that you've made. You see, season 1 took place in mostly one city. We learned about the power dynamic there, who was in control, and how people were treated. The idea is to start there and expand upon those ideas. But no, let's disregard everything that came prior and Ryan Johnson this. So, In conclusion, there are plenty of good ideas here. However, the show suffers from too many issues. Nearly everything is executed poorly, with no care about consistency or logic. There was no understanding of the world, stakes, or characters, and it honestly feels like a first draft. On top of all of that, it wasted things and retconned others from season 1. As I said, the church is left behind, never to be brought up again. The heroes are barely in this season, giving most of the time to Carmilla, which drags everything else down to lift her up. Dracula isn't given much of a character at all. The Night Horde threat has seemingly vanished overnight. Dracula said he was summoning an army from hell. There's never a hint of Carmilla and Hector being caught, and Dracula would still kill Carmilla in his weakened state, considering he was overpowering Alucard, who has been stated that he is almost as smart and as strong as Dracula.
Alucard knows almost as much as Dracula himself, and is almost as strong.
And if Alucard could not beat Dracula while weakened, then what did Carmilla hope to do? Yes, the art is nice, the animation is fine in places, and a lot of the fight scenes are very enjoyable, and a few funny moments sprinkled in. There are a couple of interesting characters, but it's too little and is drowned out by everything else. That's it. I'm done here. My suggestion, stay away unless you enjoy hurting your brain. We'll see if I go back for season 3. Yes, I know it's out now, but I don't have much of a drive because I don't want to see any of these characters be further destroyed.